What if I told you that the very qualities you're most proud of, your kindness, your patience, your loyalty, your willingness to love deeply, are exactly the reasons a narcissist can trap you, drain you, and slowly make you question your own sanity? And what if surviving them has nothing to do with being stronger, smarter, or more caring, but requires becoming something completely different, something most people never expect, because the person who actually escapes a narcissist isn't the one who fights harder or loves harder. It's the one who quietly stops playing the game altogether, and once you understand why, you'll never look at relationships or your own power the same way again. When most people imagine someone overpowering another person, they picture physical dominance, loud aggression, or obvious intimidation. But narcissists rarely operate that way because direct force would expose them too quickly and push people away. And what they actually rely on is something far more subtle and far more dangerous, which is psychological manipulation that slowly reshapes how you think, feel, and even perceive reality itself. Instead of controlling you with threats, they control you with confusion, charm, and emotional pressure, starting with what feels like admiration and connection, giving you attention that seems flattering and intense. So you lower your guard, making you believe you finally met someone who truly understands you. And once that bond forms, they begin small distortions that are easy to dismiss, like subtle criticisms disguised as jokes, backhanded compliments, or moments where they deny saying something you clearly remember, and each instance feels too minor to fight over. So you rationalize it and move on, not realizing that these tiny fractures are slowly weakening your confidence. Over time, they question your memory, your judgment, and your reactions. So instead of trusting yourself, you start looking to them for clarification, and this is exactly where their power grows, because the moment you stop trusting your own perception, you become dependent on theirs, which allows them to rewrite events in their favor, turning arguments into your fault, turning their hurtful behavior into your oversensitivity, and turning their neglect into your neediness. They may use guilt to keep you compliant, acting wounded whenever you set a boundary, or they may use silence and withdrawal to make you anxious, knowing you'll chase them just to restore peace. And sometimes they alternate affection with coldness, creating an emotional roller coaster that keeps you hooked because your brain begins craving the rare moments of warmth like a reward. And this inconsistency isn't accidental, but strategic, designed to keep you off balance so you're always trying harder, explaining more, giving more, sacrificing more, while they invest very little. Unlike physical strength, which is visible and easier to resist, psychological manipulation works invisibly, slipping into everyday conversations and ordinary moments, making you doubt yourself so gradually that you don't even notice the shift until you feel exhausted, insecure, and strangely responsible for everything that goes wrong. And by then, you're not being controlled by force, but by your own fear of conflict, your desire to fix things, and your hope that if you just behave better, they'll return to the loving person they once pretended to be. Which is why narcissistic control is so effective, because it convinces you that you're choosing to stay, choosing to apologize, choosing to try harder, when in reality, those choices are being engineered through carefully applied emotional pressure that keeps tightening around you, shaping your thoughts and reactions without you ever seeing the strings attached. Most people who end up trapped with a narcissist are not weak, foolish, or naive, but deeply caring, conscientious, and emotionally responsible individuals who believe that relationships are built through effort, empathy, and understanding. And it is precisely these strengths that slowly become their greatest liabilities. Because instead of walking away at the first red flag, they lean in closer, convinced that love requires patience, and that conflict can be solved if they just communicate better or try harder. When the narcissist criticizes them, they don't immediately see it as manipulation. They assume they must have done something wrong, so they apologize and adjust their behavior. When the narcissist withdraws affection, they don't label it as emotional punishment. they interpret it as a sign that they need to be more supportive. When the narcissist explodes or blames them, they don't recognize it as projection. They search themselves for flaws, wondering how they can improve. And this constant self-examination might sound mature and healthy in normal relationships. But with a narcissist, it becomes a trap because every ounce of self-doubt becomes leverage that the narcissist can use to control the narrative. Instead of saying, "This treatment is unacceptable," they say, "Maybe I'm being too sensitive." And instead of demanding respect, they try to earn it, pouring more time, energy, and emotional labor into a person who only takes and rarely gives. And the more they invest, the harder it becomes to leave. Because now they're not just fighting for love, they're fighting for all the effort they've already poured in, telling themselves it can't all be for nothing. They begin to over-explain their feelings, over-accommodate the narcissist's moods, and over-function in the relationship, becoming the peacekeeper, the problem solver, the emotional caretaker, while the narcissist quietly benefits from this imbalance, knowing that this person will tolerate more than most people ever would. And what makes it even more painful is that these caring individuals genuinely believe they can heal the narcissist, believing that if they are patient enough, kind enough, or loyal enough, the narcissist will eventually feel safe and change, not realizing that narcissism doesn't soften in the presence of love, but exploits it. Each time they forgive behavior that crosses a line, the line moves further. Each time they excuse cruelty as stress or trauma, the cruelty becomes more frequent. Each time they sacrifice their needs to keep the relationship stable, their sense of self shrinks a little more until they look back and barely recognize who they used to be. And the tragedy is that nothing they do actually fixes the situation, because the narcissist isn't looking for mutual growth or accountability. They are looking for control and validation, which means the harder this person tries to please, the more the narcissist expects, creating a cycle where effort only leads to deeper exhaustion and emotional depletion, leaving them stuck in a loop of hoping, fixing, and proving their worth to someone who was never interested in valuing them in the first place. One of the most misunderstood truths about dealing with a narcissist is that your emotional reactions, the very things that make you human and sincere, become the exact tools they use to control you. Because to a narcissist, emotion is not something to share or nurture, but something to harvest. Something to provoke, measure, and manipulate, and every visible reaction you give them becomes information and fuel. When you cry, they see proof that they can hurt you. When you argue passionately, they see confirmation that they still have your attention. When you defend yourself for hours trying to explain your intentions, they don't hear your logic. They simply enjoy the fact that you're working so hard for their approval, because in their mind, your emotional investment equals their power. What feels to you like standing up for yourself or trying to fix the relationship often feels to them like supply, a steady stream of energy that reassures them they matter, that they can still move you like a puppet, and this is why they deliberately provoke you, saying things they know will sting, twisting facts, bringing up old wounds, comparing you to others, or accusing you of things that make no sense, not because they want resolution, but because they want a reaction. Because the moment you raise your voice, start pleading, or spiral into self-doubt, they know they've succeeded. It's almost like they press emotional buttons just to watch you light up, and once you react, the focus shifts away from their behavior and onto yours. So suddenly you're defending your tone, your anger, or your tears instead of addressing what they did, which means the original issue never gets solved and they escape accountability yet again. Over time, this creates a painful cycle where you feel compelled to express more and more just to be heard, while they grow colder and more detached. Because the imbalance itself feeds them, your chaos becomes their calm, your desperation becomes their control, and you start feeling ashamed of your own emotions, wondering why you can't stay composed, not realizing that the situation was engineered specifically to destabilize you. Even positive emotions can be exploited, because if you show too much love or admiration, they may withhold affection to make you chase it harder, teaching you that even joy must be earned. And this constant emotional tug of war keeps you focused entirely on them, analyzing every word, every mood shift, every text message, while they sit back, knowing that your mental and emotional world revolves around their behavior. The more reactive you become, the more predictable you become, and the more predictable you are, the easier you are to control, which is why narcissists often escalate drama when things get calm, because peace starves them. But emotional intensity feeds them, and without realizing it, you end up supplying the very energy that keeps the dynamic alive. Trapped in a loop where every tear, every argument, and every attempt to be understood quietly strengthens their grip. When dealing with a narcissist, people often believe that love, intelligence, patience, or even loyalty will protect them. But none of those qualities matter nearly as much as one simple skill that most people struggle to practice, and that is the ability to set and enforce clear boundaries. Because boundaries are not about changing the narcissist or teaching them how to behave, they are about defining what you will and will not tolerate, and then consistently acting in alignment with that decision. A boundary is not a speech, not a long emotional explanation, and not a request for understanding. It is a line that says, if this happens, I will do this. And the power comes not from the words themselves, but from your willingness to follow through without arguing, pleading, or negotiating. Narcissists are experts at testing limits, pushing just a little further each time to see how much access they still have to your time, your energy, and your emotions. And if you respond with explanations or second chances, they interpret that not as kindness, but as weakness, because to them, a boundary that isn't enforced isn't real. For example, if you say you won't tolerate disrespect, but you stay after repeated insults, the message they receive is that disrespect is acceptable. And each time you stay, the line moves further back, shrinking your sense of safety and self-worth. Boundaries, however, interrupt this cycle because they remove the endless debates that narcissists thrive on, replacing emotional arguments with calm, predictable consequences. And this calm consistency is deeply uncomfortable for them because it limits their control. When you stop over-explaining and simply disengage, leave the room, end the call, or reduce contact, you deny them the drama they use to pull you back in. And suddenly they have fewer ways to manipulate you. Healthy boundaries also protect your mental clarity, because instead of constantly analyzing their behavior or trying to decode their moods, you focus only on your own standards and responses, which keeps you grounded in reality rather than trapped in their shifting narratives. It may feel harsh at first, especially if you are naturally empathetic, but boundaries are not punishments. They are acts of self-respect that signal to both you and the narcissist that your well-being is non-negotiable, creating a structure where your peace is prioritized over their approval, and that quiet firmness becomes the strongest shield you can carry in their presence. Most people believe that the way to deal with a difficult or toxic person is through confrontation, through long conversations, heartfelt explanations, or dramatic standoffs where everything is finally exposed and resolved. But when it comes to a narcissist, confrontation rarely brings clarity or closure, and instead becomes another trap that pulls you deeper into their web. Because confrontation assumes that both people care about truth, accountability, and mutual understanding, and a narcissist cares about none of those things. They care about winning, controlling the narrative, and protecting their fragile ego at any cost. The moment you confront them, even calmly, they don't listen to your concerns with empathy. They scan your words for weaknesses, distort your points, interrupt, deflect, blame, and somehow twist the entire situation until you are the one defending yourself. So what began as a simple attempt to express how you feel turns into a confusing battle where you leave doubting your own memory and wondering how everything became your fault. They may deny events that clearly happened, accuse you of being too sensitive or dramatic, or suddenly bring up your past mistakes to shift attention away from their behavior. And this endless back and forth drains you emotionally while giving them exactly what they want, which is your time, your energy, and your focus. Detachment, on the other hand, removes the very stage they perform on, because instead of arguing, explaining, or trying to make them understand, you quietly step back. You stop seeking validation. You stop trying to correct every lie. You stop reacting to every jab, and this emotional neutrality starves the dynamic that keeps them powerful. Detachment does not mean you stop caring or become cold. It means you stop personalizing their behavior and stop believing it is your responsibility to fix or educate them, recognizing that their patterns are deeply ingrained and not yours to solve. When you detach, their insults lose their sting because you no longer look to them for approval. Their provocations lose impact because you refuse to engage. And their attempts to pull you into drama fall flat because you simply don't show up to the fight. And this calm withdrawal unsettles them far more than any confrontation ever could, because they can manipulate emotions, but they struggle to manipulate someone who offers none. Over time, this quiet distance protects your mental health, preserves your clarity, and returns your energy to you, allowing you to observe rather than absorb their chaos, creating space where their influence weakens and your sense of self slowly strengthens. The only person who truly survives a narcissist is not the loudest, the toughest, or the most confrontational, but the one who quietly refuses to participate in the psychological game altogether. Because narcissistic dynamics depend entirely on engagement, on pulling you into arguments, guilt, explanations, and emotional chaos. And the moment you stop playing your assigned role, the entire system begins to collapse. This person does not try to prove their innocence or convince the narcissist to understand them, because they recognize that understanding was never the goal, control was. So instead of chasing clarity or closure, they conserve their energy and focus on protecting their inner stability. They don't rush to respond to every accusation, they don't defend every misunderstanding, and they don't scramble to fix every mood shift, because they have learned that constant reaction only tightens the narcissist's grip. There is a calmness to them, a grounded self-trust that says, "I know who I am, and I don't need you to agree." And that quiet certainty makes them incredibly difficult to manipulate. When guilt is used against them, they examine it logically rather than emotionally. When drama is created, they step back instead of stepping in. When disrespect appears, they distance themselves rather than debate it. And this consistent refusal to engage removes the emotional fuel the narcissist relies on. What makes this survivor different is not a lack of empathy, but a deep respect for themselves, an understanding that compassion should never come at the cost of self-abandonment. And because they no longer seek validation or fear disapproval, the narcissist's tactics simply have nowhere to land, leaving them with nothing to grab onto and no way to control someone who has already decided that their peace is worth more than the relationship. So when you step back and look at the whole picture, you begin to realize something that changes everything. Something most people learn only after years of exhaustion and heartbreak. And that is this simple truth. Surviving a narcissist is not about loving harder, arguing smarter, or sacrificing more of yourself, because every time you overgive, over-explain, or overfeel, you unintentionally hand them more control, and the very traits you were taught to value become the strings they pull. The real shift happens the moment you stop trying to win their approval and start protecting your own peace. The moment you understand that you were never meant to fix them, heal them, or convince them to see your worth, because your worth was never the problem in the first place. Survival comes from clarity, from boundaries that don't bend, from emotions that aren't easily hooked, and from the quiet confidence to walk away without needing the last word or the perfect closure. It's choosing self-respect over explanation, calm over chaos, and distance over drama, knowing that not every battle deserves your energy and not every relationship deserves your presence. And when you reach that point, when you no longer react the way they expect, when you no longer chase, defend, or plead, something powerful happens. Their grip weakens, their tactics fail, and the fog lifts. Because a narcissist can only control the version of you that doubts yourself, not the one who stands steady and grounded in truth. In the end, the one who survives isn't the strongest or the smartest, but the one who refuses to play a game designed to break them, the one who quietly steps out of the storm and chooses peace. And that choice, simple and firm, is the greatest act of strength you will ever make.